I really started to question my identity and do I fit in here? But I had to learn Japanese right away and I just switched right away.
So do you feel like you had more of an awareness of culture at a younger age than the average person?
They really think foreigners are lazy. Gradually, I think I learned how Japanese I had become. I think I'll get canceled after saying this, but
It's so great to meet you, Joshua. Thank you for doing this.
yes. Yeah, of course, of course. My pleasure. My
I've
pleasure.
actually been following your content online for quite a while, and
Oh,
I'm
really?
just
Wow. Thank you.
yeah, I can't remember when I first saw your videos, but it was like, I don't know, maybe a year ago or something like that. And I'm just fascinated by your cultural heritage. It's such an interesting combination. And so anyway, let's just get into it right from the beginning. Where are you from? Where were you born? Where were you raised?
Yeah, so I'm from Tokyo. Born in Tokyo, grew up in the suburbs, place called Saitama, not far from Tokyo. And my my parents are from Hokkaido, Japan, the North Island of Japan. But their parents, they came to Japan from the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And I also lived in the States when I was a kid for like a few years. And I also went to American school in Tokyo for middle school. But other than that, I just went to local Japanese public school. And yeah, and I've been doing acting. I've been an actor since I was like 18. So I went into showbiz straight after Japanese high school. And I've been doing commercials, TV shows, and all that. And then I switched to content creating after that. And that's what I do full time right now.
Wow. Okay, so you were born in Japan, but your parents were also born in Japan.
Yeah, so my mom was born in Hokkaido. My dad was born in London, but his parents actually met in Japan, but they were back in the UK for 1 year. So that's why he's British by law. And that's why I get British citizenship. Yeah, so they're both from Japan as well. But my dad only went to international school. My mom only went to Japanese school. So even though they're like both from Japan, they got very different education as well. So my dad speaks more English. My mom speaks more English. And the Jap no, I'm sorry, opposite. My dad speaks more English and my mom speaks more Japanese. But yeah, we're all like bilingual. So we just mix Japanese and English all the time, like 50-50 in the house. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have one sister, one brother. I'm the youngest of three.
Okay, so were your siblings also born in Japan then?
Yeah, all three. We were all born in Japan, but they went to international school longer than me, I think. Yeah. So I was the only one that went back to Japanese school from high school. I just hated international school so much. Like I was just like, put me back to Japanese school. I want to be with my friends again and all that. So yeah, so even like in our family, like my siblings, we my Japanese is stronger than my siblings, and their English is stronger than mine. So we kind of teach each other as well. So it's pretty good deal, I would say.
Yeah, no kidding. So you said that you had family roots in New Zealand as well. Is that on your mom's side then?
Yeah, my mom's parents are from New Zealand. Yeah, so my grandparents from my mom's side is from New Zealand. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite a mix. You're like half British, half Kiwi, 100% Japanese.
Yeah, so but if I did the DNA test and but I'm mostly Scottish, like 80 something percent Scottish through New Zealand, Australia, and UK.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like for any like former colony, there's usually some European roots there, right? Like my family was all, is all from Canada, but originally we're European, we're German. So I guess that would make sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
your surname tells it, right? Hartman,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty German for sure. So your parents originally had you in an international school and you switched to a Japanese school?
So I was in the States. I was going to preschool in the States. Then we came back to Japan. I was put into Japanese kindergarten. Then I went to Japanese elementary school. Then I went into American school in Tokyo from middle school. Then after middle school, I went back to Japanese high school, if that makes it's like a
Okay.
sandwich, isn't? Yeah, like yeah. So I had
Hmm.
like a rough 2 years at this American school. Like I was too Japanese back then, so I was like, I can't do this anymore. And yeah, pretty intense.
Why did you guys move to the States? How did you end up there?
My dad wanted to go to grad school there, and he got accepted, so he decided to take all of us to Virginia Beach, and we were all in Virginia Beach for 2 years. So my first memory of life is in the States, like from three to five. So that's why my accent is kind of American, and like I think I was very, oh, my attitude was more American before, and I had that American, vibe going on. But yeah, so that's why we moved, and I pretty much thought I was American. Then I was like brought back to Japan, put into preschool, like kindergarten in Japan, and I was the only foreigner there. So I was like, oh, what's going on? Yeah, so but I had to learn Japanese right away, and I just switched right away. Like I was only like five, so
Yeah, I guess you learn out of necessity, especially that age, right? When you need to fit in with the other kids and you want to make friends and stuff, you're going to end up learning one way or another for sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, what was it that originally brought your family line to Japan? Like your
So
grandparents?
my grandparents were Protestant missionaries. So yeah, they all wanted to go to Japan to do mission work. So they were planting churches actually in Hokkaido, doing mission, like Christian mission work. So, and they all just liked Japan, and they all just stayed, and most passed away in Japan. And one is still alive. He's still in Hokkaido, my grandfather on my mom's side. Yeah, so they all moved to Japan in their 20s, and they just stayed forever, basically.
Wow, that's a pretty big undertaking to say, "Hey, I'm going to dedicate my life to being in a different country at 20 years old, learning a new culture, I'm assuming a new language." That's pretty crazy.
It is crazy. Like they're really motivated, dedicated, grounded people. So it was really good to have that kind of inspiration, role models since I was a kid, like I thought that was almost norm. I thought that was what people do because all four of your grandparents are doing that. So that's why maybe I'm doing like something similar as well. Like I go to the UK a lot. I just go to all these places to live, and I always come back to Tokyo, but I'm always going somewhere, doing something new and all that. So yeah, it was pretty good situation, I would say, like having those big role models. Yeah.
Did your grandparents go to any other countries on mission trips or only Japan?
They actually went to other Asian countries, Myanmar, Singapore. Yeah, I think they went up to a lot. And they would also go back to their own country every 5 years, I think. So they would like stop by a lot of countries because they would go back by ship. Yeah, I think they went to a lot of Asian countries. And yeah, I remember my granddad going to South Asia a lot. Yeah, I forgot where specifically, but I think it was like Singapore or yeah, around there, Indonesia maybe. But they never lived there. Yeah.
Okay. It was like short. There were shorter trips. Japan was where they spent the most time.
Yeah, yeah, they were based in Japan, and they would just go to other Asian countries for like a few weeks or something.
You mentioned that when you moved from the States to Japan as a kid at like 5 years old, you noticed that, hey, I'm different here. Like I'm a foreigner. You
Mm-mm.
said you were the only foreigner like in your school or in your class. Um, at what age did you stop feeling like you were different than everybody else? Or did you? Was
I
there a
think I
point where
still
you're like,
do.
you still do? Okay.
I think, to be honest, like when I was five, I don't like when I got into that kindergarten, I knew I was different, but I was like pretty much happy with it. Like I was like, I'm getting attention, I like this. Like that I was that really loud, crazy, kid, in kindergarten. So I was pretty happy with it. But I think it was around when I was 12 that I started noticing I'm very different. Like I'm like, oh, wow, I'm actually not Japanese. I really never cared growing up, like in elementary school, but it's that age. So I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually different. Oh, I don't look like my friends. I really want to look like my friends. What can I do, you know? So I kind of got shy almost, like for looking different. And then whenever I hang out with my friends, whenever like there's like a random person coming up to us and like telling us, like we would do like crazy stuff and like they would like tell us off, you know, and like I can tell they're like looking at me the most because I'm like I'm looking different amongst my Japanese friends and they're like I can tell there's like a weird vibe going on, but yeah, so but I think it was and then in high school, when I went back to Japanese school, my friends just accepted me as who I am, who I was, and like never really cared. But I think when I hit early 20s, I think I really started to question my identity and like, do I fit in? Do I fit in here? Like, I didn't feel like I fit in this country. I still don't, like fully. But then so that's why I moved to the UK to actually feel part of the society, you know? And yeah, that was really good actually. So it really helped me feel part of the society and like being accepted, you know, in Japan because they only see my face and they think I'm this or that, you know, like they really label me. So even though Japanese is my first language, like it's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah, but yeah, and I recently just came back from London after living there for 2 years, and I feel like I'm starting a new chapter. And I've been back for like a month now, but it's been pretty good. Yeah.
So like when it was really obvious um, that you were different, or maybe that you didn't fit in, are you talking mostly about like the way that you look physically, like because you don't look Japanese, or was it also cultural or like linguistic?
Yeah, both, I think. Like I was in the States, my mentality was kind of developing, you know, like that American mentality. And then I went back to Japan, and at home, I'm taught a very Christian, Western, that mindset, you know, that way of living and the way of thinking. But one step outside, I'm in like a very different environment, very different society, and very different mindset. So I think I was struggling with that as well. Like I would have a very different way of thinking than my friends, and sometimes I would like clash and like we would get in an argument, or I'll be teaching them what it's like in the West and all that. I'm like typical white person, you know, like this is how we do it in our country, you know.
Uh-huh.
But gradually, like I think I learned how Japanese I had become, how much of, yeah, I think culturally I'm more Japanese than those countries. Like I never know what to say. Like I'm British by law, but I've never lived there properly until I was like 21 or something. But I lived in the States, so yeah, I would just say the West. But I think yeah, physically as well, like our bodies, I'm hairier than my friends, or I'm in average, I'm taller than my friends, or I have like different eye color than them. So while we develop, like grow, like we get older, like our bodies doesn't look similar, you know, it's a bit different and we have different problems or you know, like I would have to use more deodorant than them or something, you know. Like deodorant isn't much of a culture here. Like they don't smell that much, you know, Asians, like East Asians, they don't really have that odor, you know, but I had to use deodorant and all that. So yeah, really minor stuff, but physically
So
as well, I think.
so like growing up at home, the culture that you guys had was very Western, like between your siblings and your parents.
It was like half and half because even my parents grew up in Japan, but so they have their own, but my parents are from the West, so they have their own version of Western culture. So I think from people from like straight out of the West might think we're Japanese, but we think this is Western, you know, like how, but even the food we eat is like 50-50, like Western, Japanese, it's like a fusion. But yeah, my parents only spoke English at home. Like they try to stick to English the whole time. And even though I replied in Japanese, like I was like, no, I'm not gonna speak English. That's like grandparents' language, Like I hated English my whole life. Thank God it kind of came back now. But yeah, I think it pretty much our household, like, yeah, it was like very Western Christian Protestant, like, that kind of, yeah, atmosphere.
How much of that do you think was influenced by the religion, and how much of it was influenced by like heritage, like cultural heritage from other countries?
That I can't tell you, but I don't know. It's like a mix, isn't it? It's the Kiwi culture, Aussie culture, British culture, but with Christian culture and like that belief or the ideology, I guess. Like, but I don't really know what is from the West and what is not, because for me it was normal, but it was like the standard for me. So I like I don't know, but whenever I went to my grandma's house near here, I could tell her the way she lays out stuff and like the things she had were very British, like her sofa, her couch, like how things are laid out. Now I know that's like really British. So yeah, I think it's a mix of religion and the country's culture, I think. But I don't really know that much. Like I don't know where the line is, I guess.
Right. I mean, something that's interesting for all of us and our own cultural identities is that normally it's we can't see it ourselves. Like if you just
Yeah,
live in a
yeah.
place and you grew up in a place, you don't know what culture you really grew up in until you leave and or other people come in and you can see the difference. But for you, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you were already more aware of your home culture growing up because it was so different than the culture you lived in, like, or went
Yeah.
to school in,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I was forced to know, I think. Yeah.
So do you feel like you had more of an awareness of culture at a younger age than the average person?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I was we came back to Japan when I was 5, and I can already tell that there was like a huge difference between the US and Japan. And at the age of 5 already, I was like teaching my friends like how American sweets are better, like American candies are better, like American this, American that, like I already had this awareness that there's an outside world, because I've already moved back to Japan from the US. And then my British, Aussie, New Zealand culture from my grandparents in Japan. So I already knew there's a lot of countries outside there. There's a lot more going on. So I think, yeah, I did have a big understanding, and I remember teaching my Japanese friends English a lot. I was like this is really funny. The word, itchy, right? Like itchy. But in Japanese, when you say itchy, it means sex, So I was
Okay.
like, I remember, like, if you say itchy in English, it's itchy. So yeah, so I remember telling my friends that. And, yeah, I don't know why I still remember that.
Do you think that some of the struggles you had growing up, like integrating into Japanese culture as a foreign looking person, do you think your parents went through that as well when they were younger?
I asked them this before. So my dad was pretty much in the international bubble his whole life, I think. I mean, he's worked in Japanese environment. He's worked with them. He's he grew up in a church. He grew up in a Japanese church. So but I don't think my dad or my parents never really they knew who they were, and like they were really close with the missionary community. They knew they were part of that community, and they never, I don't know, like they don't really seem to care as much as I did or my siblings did. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was that time period. Like they were just fine with themselves. And I think it really helped that they found each other because they're both foreigners from Japan. Like that sentence is kind of messed up, but they're you know, non-Japanese people from Japan. So I think it really helped that they found each other and like they can relate to each other and they kind of fought together. So it really helped to have parents that are also from Japan because I know so many people like me, but their parents are from outside Japan and they really struggle because their parents don't speak Japanese. Their parents have no idea what it's like in Japanese school and like so they really struggle. So the second generation struggles more than third generation, of course. So thank God that my parents knew what I was going through and I could always ask questions. And even my dad, he went to the same international school as I did. Like there's like a Christian international school in Tokyo. And whenever I was like, oh, I hate that school so much, like it really take me out of there right now. Like he was like he also hated that school, so he could relate to me and all that. So yeah, it was pretty good. But I don't think they really struggled that much. Yeah, they don't seem to care. Yeah, yeah, they're strong people, I guess.
So you were saying that it's like hard to define a little bit like who your parents are like ethnically. You're like they're foreigners living in Japan, but they're technically from Japan. Like, do you guys would you consider yourself a foreigner?
I used to like I because the word gaikokujin, the word foreigner in Japanese, like gaikokujin, like they when they say gaikokujin, they just mean like they usually just mean ethnically, like foreigner, you know. That's what the word gaikokujin means almost. Like it means a person from a foreign country, like literally, like the characters, outside country person, gaikokujin. But whenever they say gaikokujin, it just means they're not ethnically not Japanese or East Asian. So I used to identify, like I would just say, I would be fine whenever somebody called me a gaikokujin because I knew I am a foreigner. But the translation, when it becomes a foreigner, like the word becomes like somebody from a foreign country, somebody that's not from Japan. So the more I learned about the word foreigner and like alien, like we were used to we used the government used to call foreigners aliens, like we used to have this alien card or something, so for them like foreigners are like aliens, almost. So yeah, but after living in the UK, like I went back to my own country, but I felt more like a foreigner there than in Japan. So then I realized, oh wow, I'm not a foreigner. Like I'm not a foreigner in Japan. I'm from Japan, Like I was born and raised there. I'm culturally more Japanese than British. So I can confidently say now that I'm not a foreigner. Like whenever somebody's like, "Oh, he's a foreigner," blah blah blah. Like I almost want to stop them and be like, "Oh no, I'm from here." So or like whenever I tell them I'm from Japan or I was born in Japan, like their attitude really changes. Like they really change. Like, oh, okay, yeah. And you know what I'm talking about. Like they really change. Like almost everybody. They're like, oh, okay, sure, okay, whatever. Some people have a hard time like processing, but yeah, mostly it's fine.
Because like technically speaking, like there's a few different ways that you can kind of define where someone is from, right? It can be legally, like, okay, what's your passport? It can be through your ethnicity, like, where's your heritage from, like your blood. And then it can be culturally, like, where did you spend the most time growing up? And maybe with that one also comes an assumption that you spent some of your like more formative years in one culture or another. But like
Yeah,
for all like for social purposes, the only one people really care about is the culture one because that seems to be where we connect. You don't meet someone and go like, "Hey, how's it going? My name's Jarrett. Wait, before we're friends, tell me where your passport is from." Like we don't do that, but we can connect to people within our own culture like quite, quite easily. You can automatically recognize, hey, this person's also from where I'm from, right?
Yeah, yeah. But people in Japan do that though. Like, hi, nice to meet you. Where are you from? Like, it's like, what's your passport? 国籍はどこですか? What's your passport? It's like, oh wow, okay. I'm British, I guess. So they really want to know your ethnicity, like where your blood is from. So they really check in the beginning.
Does Japan have that law? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like citizenship through blood, not through birthright. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said that
yeah. They
you're
still do that. Yeah,
okay. So even though you're, oh, is it third generation Japanese?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You're third generation Japanese. You don't have the passport.
yeah. That's right. So I'm technically still British, but it's only my grandmother that's from the UK. Like I think I'm supposed to be Australian. My dad's dad is Australian. So technically I'm supposed to be Australian, but he couldn't pass down. But fortunately my dad was born in the UK, so that's why I get a British passport. But technically I don't think I qualify. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I think if my dad was born in Japan like his sister, I think I would have been Japanese because the government, they're supposed to give out citizenships if the kid is like stateless. Like, yeah. So I was almost stateless. So in that case, I think Japanese government gives you Japanese citizenship. So I don't know which was like easier. Like, but yeah, I have a permanent residency in Japan, British passport. So I think I'm in a good situation right now.
So does anyone in your family have Japanese citizenship?
Not that I know of. No, we don't. Only like, and my parents' siblings, they all married Japanese people. So all my aunties, uncles are Japanese, and all my cousins, I have like 16 cousins, and they're all half white, half Japanese. So they're all Japanese by law. Yeah, like they all have Japanese passports and all that. But it's only my family that that somehow just kept the blood and like, we just stayed foreign, I guess, foreign looking, and like we kept the passport. Yeah, so it's kind of strange. Like
Mm.
my cousins, they get treated more like Japanese than us, but we're basically from the same country, same environment, same school, everything. But they're more Japanese than us suddenly. I mean, they're one of their parent is actually from Japan, but you know what I mean, right? It's kind of strange.
And that is really strange. Like I find that it's like hard for me to wrap my head around that because like speaking of like
Yeah.
talking about how culture is so important for human connection, like wherever you grew up in my mind is where you're from, like and in Canada, this is such a diverse country that it's not uncommon at all to see people from all over the world who grew up in Canada, and I think that most people wouldn't see them as anything but Canadian. And so when people have this kind of technicality, like line in the sand, like I'm over here and you're over there, even legally, it's like, wow, that's such a strange concept for me.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of grew up with that meant like that culture, like that way of thinking at the same time, going to American middle school, like consuming American media, but also consuming Japanese media. So I was like always like, what is the truth? What is so it was I always felt stuck in the middle. Like, so what's the correct answer? What's the truth? So I was always like seeking for truth, maybe. I was like,
How,
what am I?
when you're in Japan, how many times a day do you have to explain to people what your story is?
Maybe once or twice a day,
Every day.
every day. Because my job is to like meet a lot of people, meet a lot of new people, like what you do, basically. So, and I love going out to like new places and meeting people, and yeah, maybe once or twice every day.
So if you're meeting like a new person, is it like a convenient icebreaker that maybe you know how the conversation is going to start, or does it get tiring having to have the same conversation over and over?
It's both, isn't it? It's tiring. It's very tiring. Like I'm like just giving my coffee, I just want my coffee. Or like I just wanted to say something casual and like get it done with. Or but whatever I say, it becomes the conversation goes into your Japanese is so good. Your Japanese is so good. Why? I think even yesterday or 2 days ago, it was like, oh, your Japanese is so good. These days, I just ask them, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that is? I'm like,
Hmm.
what do you think? They're like, oh, why is your Japanese so? I'm like, what? So can you guess why? They're like, oh, they're kind of like, oh. So I'm like, yeah, I'm born in Tokyo. And they're like, but where are you really from? That $1 million question. They're like, but where are you really from? You're like, oh, I'm British or something. And they're like, oh yeah, I've been to the UK. Like, oh, I was just there. They want something foreign from you. They want something different, something not Japanese, because they want to talk to foreigners and like they want something new. So it yeah, it depends on the person. They're either like relieved that I'm from Japan and speak Japanese, or they're like kind of let down that I'm not from like outside Japan, if that makes sense. So I never know which way the conversation's going. So I'm like, oh, I wonder where this is going. So I have to think about that every time. I'm like, I just want my latte, get my, but, but yeah, like maybe like 20% of conversations. Like when you're just buying something, they don't really ask you, but when it's like, when you talk to them longer, like I went to this cute little restaurant in Tokyo the other day with my brother, and we were just speaking Japanese, and we were just ordering in Japanese, of course. And the this couple, they seemed really puzzled that we were speaking Japanese. They were like, they weren't really asking questions, but they were like, oh, like it was kind of strange. And at the end, they were like, so why is your Japanese so good? And we're like, oh, we're born in Tokyo, blah blah blah. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense because we heard you guys speaking Japanese to each other and this and that, and like so they were listening to us the whole time. We were like sitting down and just having a normal conversation. It's like it's nice for them to ask us questions, but it's kind of uncomfortable that they were listening to our conversation the whole time. Like, so yeah, it's weird.
And like at a superficial level, it seems like it's a really nice thing that like people are complimenting you and they're like interested in your story. But if that's your life every single day, I imagine that that probably gets tiring.
Yeah, and it's not like I studied Japanese, you know. If I studied Japanese and like I want to impress people and I want to be complimented, I'm happy. Like if somebody compliments my Korean, like I'll be happy. Like I'll be over the moon, you know. But if it's your native language, like the language you spoke your whole life, it's like a different story, you know. You feel like an imposter, you know. It's like I didn't really work on my language, right? I've never really studied. Like, I mean, I love the language a lot, so I really did study it. Like, kind of go deep into the meaning of the this word or the kanji. Like, study more. So I knew more words than my friends. I knew more Chinese characters than my friends, and like I know more big words than my friends. But still, when people are like, "Oh, you know that you even know that word," like they're like, oh, "You can also use that word." Like, I did go to school. Like, I did study hard. I do read books. So
Like from your perspective, it might seem like people are underestimating you. Like, oh,
yeah,
he
yeah,
he
yeah,
looks like he's not from here, so he must not speak it very well. But if he knows this word, oh my god, that's amazing. Like, kind of, it could come across as patronizing, knowing that you are a native speaker in Japanese.
yeah. But yeah, they're like, I tell them like I grew up in Japan, blah blah blah. But they're like, "Oh, but I assume you don't read or write kanji, like, but do you read and write kanji, Like, I'm like, yeah, like I have a degree in kanji,
Yeah.
I had to take it in school. Thanks to your country, I had to take it in school, So yeah, they always want to test you, not always, but it's like, what's your level, But the moment also it's kind of strange. Like the moment they know you're a native speaker, as I said, their attitude changes. Sometimes it goes in a negative way. They're like, "Oh, he's a local. Shit, like I have to change. I have to treat him like a Japanese person." Their attitude kind of gets cold because they really it's kind of strange. Like, but when they talk to foreigners, they're like really happy. Like they have this really chill, outgoing attitude. But the moment they know I'm from here, they're like, "Oh, maybe I should go back to go back into my Japanese mode." So yeah, that happened to me last year. It was pretty fun. This guy just talked to me on the bus, and he was like, "Oh, where are you from?" Blah blah blah. And I kept telling him like I'm from there. I went to that elementary school there. You know, like he's like, "Oh, like, it didn't compute. Yeah, it didn't compute." But eventually, he clicked, and he was like, "Oh," and then he just shut down, and he just straight went out of the bus, and he said nothing after that. So I was like,
Hmm.
"Okay."
Be,
Yeah.
so like, is it normal for Japanese people to engage with strangers like that, or are they making an exception because they think you're not from there?
If it's a foreigner. Like they're like, "Hello," It's like they get really happy. Some people really want to talk to foreigners. Like even like they might be studying English, or they just watch TV, and they see foreigners on TV, and they really want to like it's nice. It's really nice. It's cute. It's nice. But I can tell their attitude, they're so different to from when they speak to each other. It's so different. Like they suddenly don't use the formal language. Like they drop everything, and they're like really casual, and I'm just like, where did that formal language go? Like
Uh
they're
huh.
like being really polite to other customers, and the moment they come to me, they're like, "Nani?" Like what or something, and I'm just like, what? Like,
What
where's that,
happened? Uh huh.
that the polite attitude you guys do to each other? Like, where does that go? Where's the principle, Why does it not apply to foreigners? So it's kind of strange.
Yeah, like Japan is known, I think, internationally as being a place that is very polite, or maybe has a lot of like social rules about how people are supposed to conduct themselves. Is that the way that you feel living in Japan as well?
They're only polite when they're talking to somebody above them, like social hierarchy wise, when they're only talking to somebody above them. So when they're talking to somebody below them, they're really like, I'm your boss, so so it's pretty strange, like, but they will be polite to each other like strangers, but the moment they know somebody's younger, or somebody's like lower in like the social status, that's when the politeness goes out of the window. It's like it's kind of strange. Like I still don't understand. I mean, I understand it, but I don't agree with how that's going about, I guess. Like I shouldn't say they, but maybe I'm like distancing myself. But yeah, people are polite, but I've seen really messed up things here, and I don't fully agree. It really did, but they're generally like they're how they treat social spaces and things, and it's really polite, and like it's really careful. And
So, like, when you say you've seen messed up things, you mean like people being mistreated because of their place in this social ladder or
yeah,
whatever it's called?
yeah, I've seen a guy throw a hammer to an older guy once. like at work. I was at the deconstruction site for the Olympics. I was like translating, interpreting for the British team, and the the scaffolders, the scaffolders. I was working with the scaffolders and the team leader. I was like, guys, listen, listen. And they weren't really listening. So the leader of the scaffolders, well, he threw a hammer at a really old guy because he's just employed by that leader, and he just threw the hammer, and it hit him, it hit him. He was like, but he's like in his 70s or late 60s, and this I was and the Swiss team was there as well. And the Swiss guys were like, "Wait, what? What just happened? Like, was that a joke or was he serious?" I was like, "He was serious. That's what happens in Japan. Like, the moment they have control, like they will like do anything, you know." So, yeah, it was kind of shameful. Like I didn't want to show them that side of Japan.
And the social hierarchy plays a role in that because the guy throwing the hammer was the boss and the guy getting hit with the hammer was the employee.
Yeah, he was an employee.
And that's like more accepted in Japanese society. Like that's not
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
seen as like a overly negative thing.
yeah, because he, yeah. I mean, throwing a hammer, I think that's bad, and people here know that's bad, but it's like, that industry, that kind of hierarchy, like, they're like, we've been there, you know. So,
They're like, well, after all, he was the boss, so so it's okay.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
he'll
Okay.
probably stay there, the old guy will stay there. He wouldn't see it as a huge problem.
I see. I see. Yeah. He wouldn't get a lot of local support from people of saying like, "Whoa, that was really messed up. You should stand up for your rights as a
Yeah,
worker or something like that."
never, never.
Yeah, it's a very different image than people have of Japan.
I think I'll get canceled after saying this, but like it's the truth. It's what I saw, It's still a great country, but every country has its pros and cons, the downside and upside.
Sure, absolutely. You said that when you went to England, was it?
Yeah.
You recognized how Japanese you really were.
hmm
What were some of the changes that you noticed when you went there? So, or not changes, but differences culturally.
how people communicate and how people ve view life. Like things didn't seem as intense in the UK. People were really chill. Like they didn't take things seriously. They were more laid back. Like everything in Japan is like serious. Like everything is a big deal. They give life to everything. Like, there's there's a hidden story to every single thing almost, like, you know what I mean. And but when I went to the UK, it was like, oh, like life isn't that serious. Like I can be more kind to myself. I can be more relaxed, and even how people communicate in Japan, you're taught to really listen to people. Like you really have to listen to people. If you're not listening to people, you're not a proper human, kind of thing. You're not perfect. You're being disrespectful, So you're really taught to listen to people in school, But I feel like in the West, people are like listening a little bit and they're like, ah, yeah, 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 and they say what they want to say. They kind of throw in their own like things and like, so they kind of say what they want to say and people say what they want to say and that's how conversation flows. But in Japan, it's like I say one, they listen. It's like there's like a clear catch ball, they call it in Japanese, キャッチボール. 会話のキャッチボール or something. So there's like a clear, so you do feel like people are listening to you. It really does feel like that. But on the other side, you also have to be like, you know, listening, and you always have to. So, and not always, but in general, I think that's the differences I noticed. And even like food wise in Japan, like if you're not making a proper meal and if you're not eating properly, that's not a meal. That's not, you're not treating like you're not being a proper human, But in the UK, you can just have bread and something for dinner and like it's fine, It's dinner.
Hmm.
So,
So, do
yeah.
you think that for, like, let's say an average Japanese person traveling to another country, would they assume that if people aren't following those kind of rules of like intently listening or, cooking really good food or whatever it might be, would they perceive the other people as not being proper or
Yeah.
not being
Yeah.
like you said, proper humans?
Yeah, that's what they say here. Like they really think foreigners are lazy, and they
Mm,
they're really the word they use the word tekito. Like it's a very tekito is like they're like half in, half out. Like they're like, it's like, I think
okay.
that's okay. So they really view foreigners like in general, anywhere outside of Japan as like tekito. I'll give you the definition later.
But I'm assuming that, like, by the way that you're talking about this, I'm assuming that when you went to the UK, you didn't have that judgment of people there.
I think I did in the beginning when I first went to London in 2017 when I visited for the first time. I was like, what is this? Why is it so dirty? Why is everything like about to collapse? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, thank God I'm from Japan. But I realized how much that was also affecting my mental health. Like, I'm trying to be presentable all the time. I'm trying to be perfect. And then I went back to the UK in 2018. I really absorbed the culture. I was like, oh, I can also be relaxed. I can also be part of this. I can be also like laid back and like chill. Like I can cancel plans last minute and people won't judge me. So it was relieving. It was really like, oh wow, it's so much easier here. Like people judge you less. People judge you less.
Interesting. So, like, when you realize that it went both ways, of like, okay, maybe these other people aren't acting in the quote unquote proper way, but that also means that I don't have to. I can just do me, and it's okay too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I learned to be that foreigner. Yeah.
So, would you say that Japanese people are following these rules because they're like imposed on them more than they're accepting them themselves?
Um,
Because, like, if you go to a different country and then you go, oh wow, I can just live, this is good, it almost makes it sound like they weren't your rules. They were someone else's rules that they were pushing on you, and when you were in an environment where you didn't need to do that, you actually prefer not to follow them.
yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. You're correct. Yeah. And I think it applies to any Japanese person. I know a lot of Japanese people that move abroad and they they think there's like a lift. There's like there was they feel like something lifted from their shoulder. Is that what you say? Yeah. There's like a constant pressure here. It's you have to be perfect, and so whenever they move abroad, a lot of people feel liberated when they move
Mm.
abroad. But at the same time, the other side is that you're also receiving something not so perfect when you're abroad.
Yeah, like, so what is the the pro of a society that has higher expectations? What do you like on your day-to-day life in Japan? What are the benefits that you get from that?
No trash on the streets, nothing dirty. People are like generally polite to you. People they don't have that strong attitude. No, no, like unnecessary conflicts. They're always like very proper, very mannered. They're like polite to you. They're not in your face. When you ask them to do something, they will actually do it. They will actually do it. People remember things. They're more sincere and loyal, and they really take things very seriously. If you ask somebody to do this, they will do it. Or if you make a promise, they will keep that promise. Or once you're friends forever, kind of thing. It's when they're in, they're all in. But the other side is that you also have to be that, and you have to be perfect, and you can't be laid back.
And one of the ways that I think about culture and what culture means is it's like the thing that everyone understands, right, in a relative area, but you don't have to explain it. Like, it's just understood.
Hmm.
Was it like that with your family, considering you had this conglomeration of different cultures? Was there an understanding that like these are the rules we're going to follow, whether they were Japanese, like societal norms or otherwise? Was it understood what the culture was?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like we learn it in school and we see people outside, and whenever we're making a mistake, people would tell us or
But I mean, like it with you and your siblings and your parents. Like, how did you guys when you interacted with each other? Did you also say did you like, oh, we should be
uh
doing this because this is the Japanese way of life, or did
no,
you have a
no, no.
different culture between each
We have
other?
a different culture between us. Like I don't think we follow that Japanese way of communicating or living inside the house. But I really don't know what it's like in a Japanese household. I really, I really don't. So I don't know how to compare because I've never lived that life. But by the looks of it, it seems like my family is more casual and laid back compared to other families in Japan. We don't really follow that Japanese rules in our house. It's pretty much Western for us. But maybe it's very Japanese. If you came to my house and you're like, oh, this is very Japanese, like, it's very different. Yeah.
Well, now that you have spent 2 years living in London, you probably have a much better idea of what that side of your heritage is all about as well, right?
Mm-mm-mm.
And so now when you look at your family, do they look more or less Western in comparison?
They look more Japanese. Like I realized how Japanese my sister was as well. Like uh, she's more role based, more by the books kind of person, and yeah, but I don't know. My dad's very foreign. My mom's somewhere in the between. My brother's American. He went to college in the States. But he's also really good with the hierarchy in Japan. He's really good with that. He's really masculine and all that. So he knows how to be a bro in the Japanese society. So it really we all have our different version, like different level of foreignness and Japaneseness and all that. And even my humor is more Japanese, and I can really relate to them because I went to Japanese school the longest amongst my siblings, so I know more of that subtle nuances in languages more than my siblings. So I was really deeply rooted into the pop culture in Japan as well, and I was in showbiz as well. So yeah, but my vibe is more Western after living in the UK, but yeah, it's strange.
I mean, I would imagine that it's different for you as well, going to a different country where you have heritage. Like people from here will go and spend like a summer in Spain and
Mm.
then come back and be like, "Oh, I'm Spanish now." But like they didn't necessarily have the a connection with that country other than an exposure. And you know what? Like I don't want to judge those people going to another country and like integrating into the culture is a feat in and of itself, no matter where your heritage is from, of course. But it sometimes can be more superficial.
Mm.
Where
Yeah.
I would imagine for you going to London, knowing that that's like where part of your family is from, um, I don't know. It seems like it's different. It's not necessarily a vacation. It's almost like a homecoming.
It was really nice because people look like me, like people, their physique was like me, how their body looked like mine. It, they had same hair color and like the way of thinking there, it was closer to mine, and it was just nice to see people that look like me. Like that was the biggest one. I think I cried when I got to Heathrow for the first time. I remember crying because I was like, "Oh my gosh, like people look like me." And like I was like,
Mm.
I mean, I had lived in the States before. I had been to New Zealand, but when I got to Heathrow, that was when I was like, wow. These people really exist, you know. So yeah, it was a good cry. Yeah.
So do you think that your experience in Japan has been like heavily influenced by the way that you look? Like if you
Maybe.
covered your face all the time, would you have a different experience or a
Oh, for
different
sure,
perception?
100%. Like when I'm on the phone, they 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 don't know I'm a foreigner. Like, and at the end when they ask my name, like, are you the person calling or are you calling for somebody else? Are you calling for Joshua? You know, I'm like, I am Joshua. They're like, oh, okay. But so I think it really is only affected by how I look, my face. If I had a Japanese face, this experience wouldn't happen. Like all of this I'm saying, I don't think it would, like maybe half of it would be different because my mentality is also different. Because I know a lot of Japanese people that only went to international school and they struggle as well in the Japanese society. So I'm not saying it's only influenced by how I look, but a lot of it is influenced by how I look. Yeah. But also like a lot of halfies, like half foreign, half Japanese people, they really struggle as well because they kind of look Japanese, but they don't. Like, but their mentality is more Japanese because of their Japanese mom or dad, and yeah, so
I mean, and for you growing up in Japan, being born in Japan, growing up in Japan, speaking Japanese as a first language, going to school with Japanese kids, all of that stuff, and even after all of that, you're saying it's hard to integrate into the society. Does that mean that for foreigners like me, for example, if I moved to Japan, I would never have a hope of integrating?
um, I mean, if you're willing to agree with everything they do and say, maybe, but I just I have my own values and I have my own way of thinking, and it just doesn't align with Japan sometimes. Like it just there's a clash, you know. And I don't know, like I see a lot of foreigners that really integrate, and like, they only have Japanese friends. They're fine, and I used to be like that, but after talking to a lot of foreigners living in the UK, I feel like I I have my own community. I have my own people here. So I have my own version of Japan going on, you know, if that makes sense. And I'm pretty much happy with it. But yeah, if you're gonna move to Japan now, you'll really struggle. You'll really, really struggle. Like learning the language from zero would be difficult. And then customs, wait, like it it must be hard. I really don't know how people do it. I really admire like people coming from outside Japan and learning the language and like becoming Japanese. I'm just like, how do you do it? Wow. Like they must be really smart. Yeah.
And I guess going to any country also has those hurdles,
Mm.
but I think that there are probably countries that are easier. Maybe not easier. Maybe a better way of looking at it is that there are cultures that are more similar to other cultures.
Yeah. 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 Like European countries, for instance, like
Mm-hmm.
they move around a lot and the language is somewhat kind of similar and like their way of thinking is somewhat similar to, but moving to China or Japan or Korea from anywhere else must be like a huge difference, I guess.
So do you have a singular identity that you hold for yourself? Like when you think of yourself, do you think of yourself as a Japanese person, as a British person, as a mix of both, or what do you see when you look at yourself?
I'm a potato. I I really only see myself as Joshua, I think. Like all of this is like really human made stuff, like nationality and all that, but I am this one soul and all of this is just outside factors moving, like, you know, like ethnicity is just something on the outside, or my upbringing, you know, it's just man-made cultures and man-made stuff. So I only see myself from the inside. I try to. Whenever I'm like, oh, who am I? What am I? Like, what's happening? Like, I just say to myself, like, look in the inside, like you're not who you are on the outside. You're the person inside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. It's kind of recognizing that we we are more than our nationalities,
Yeah,
right? We as an individual we bring a lot of uniqueness, but it's not only within our passport. We can
yeah,
be people
yeah,
outside of that as well. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
That's a really good way of looking at it. And honestly, I think that that's probably a good place for us to leave it for today. This was a
Woo.
really great conversation, Joshua. Thank you so much for
Likewise.
taking the
Thank you very
time.
much. Thank you. Thank
And,
you.
and before we finish up, tell people how they can find you online, how they can check out your contact, get a hold of you, and all that.
Okay. So I do Instagram, at jj.jj.7. I also have my English YouTube channel, Joshua's Japan channel, but I haven't posted in like a year. But my main one is Joshua in London on YouTube. It's all in Japanese, but if you want to learn Japanese or if you speak Japanese, please follow me on YouTube as well. But I mainly post on Instagram. Like I post like stupid skits and funny skits, and they all have like English subtitles. So I think, yeah, come to my Instagram, jg.jg.7.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.